Hello, I'm Chaplain Otis Corbett. I'm the Senior Army Chaplain for the Alabama National Guard. And I'd like to share a message with you today from John chapter 20, verses 1 through 18. You know, when we find ourselves in strange or awkward situations, it's very difficult for us to look natural, as if nothing unusual had just happened. Take, for instance, a recent event that occurred when my wife and I were buying groceries right at the beginning of the social distancing measures taken in response to the COVID-19 virus. We had just finished our shopping, and we were at the checkout counter when my wife complained that the store was too warm. Now, what she actually said was this: "I'm burning up." Now, I glanced around the store to see if anyone else had heard her declaration, and I was relieved that no one seemed to notice. As soon as I could, I pushed our shopping cart out the door and into the parking lot. Then I quietly said to my wife, "Sweetheart, it really isn't the best thing to do in the midst of a pandemic to loudly exclaim in public that you are burning up." Blessedly, as I record this, my wife and I and all of our family are safe and healthy, and we're praying for all of those who've been affected by the COVID-19 virus. My point, however, is this: when something unexpected happens, it's easy to feel awkward or out of place. It is hard to look natural. Now, what we find in our focal passage today, however, is that everyone involved in the episode we're going to relate was acting very, very naturally. And I'd like to expand upon this idea. First, we see that Mary came looking for the dead. Mary came looking for the dead. Verse 1 tells us, "Now on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene came to the tomb early while it is still dark, and saw that the stone had been taken away from the tomb." Now for Mary, this was a natural act on several levels. First, everyone who was a witness to the crucifixion knew that Jesus had suffered a physical death. And while some critics of the Christian faith claim that Jesus merely swooned or faked his death, the reactions of the observers give lie to such theories. John himself was an eyewitness. So let's consider what his testimony was in chapter 19 of his gospel. Now it was a day of preparation, and the next day was to be a special Sabbath. Because the Jewish leaders did not want the bodies left on the crosses during the Sabbath, they asked Pilate to have the bodies taken down. The soldiers therefore came and broke the legs of the first man who had been crucified with Jesus and those of the other. But when they came to Jesus and found that he was already dead, they did not break his legs. Instead, one of the soldiers pierced Jesus' side with a spear, bringing a sudden flow of blood and water. The man who saw it has given testimony, and his testimony is true. He knows what he tells the truth, and he testifies to you so that you may believe. No, regardless of what the skeptics say, Jesus died, and so it was natural to look for a dead body in the cemetery. But it was natural for Mary Magdalene to come for Jesus in any case. She loved him because he had transformed her life. She had been possessed by 7 demons, but Jesus had freed her, and she became one of his most dedicated followers. Now, Mary knew that there was not time on Friday to properly anoint the body, and so she wanted to show her love to him in the only way she knew how, by coming to the tomb early as possible and anointing his body properly. And finally, it was natural because it was natural for women to do the dirty work. From the dawn of time, women have done the hard work of keeping our households running. This was true in the first century, and it is also true in many places today. When my wife and I were missionaries to Africa, it was the women or young girls who would walk for miles and miles with buckets on their heads so that their families could have water, that life-giving fluid. One of the major complaints of life in the 21st century is that women work at a job all day during the day, and then they have to come home at night and work all night in their households. Although it was natural for women to do most of the dirty work, Jesus clearly saw their worth as individuals. He, in a true countercultural move for his day, taught them the Bible, and he treated them with a genuine respect. Of course, this was natural too, because Jesus is the master of everything, even the master of social norms. Next, we see that Mary did not find what she was looking for. Mary did not find what she was looking for. Looking for something and not finding it is natural also. It seems to be a part of the human condition in this fallen and broken world that we spend much of our lives, maybe all of our lives, seeking for something that can never be found. What we seek is as varied as our own lives. Some seek power, others seek relationships, some seek pleasure, others seek money. Most of us seek peace. The problem is, as we seek these things, we are treating the symptoms and not the disease. Mary didn't find what she was looking for because she was looking in the wrong place. Jesus wasn't dead. He was alive because he had been resurrected. Like Mary, we often look for satisfaction in this life in the wrong place. This is a fruitless quest, and it reminds me of the old song, "Looking for love in all the wrong places." Now, the true cure for our longing is not in any earthly balm, but in seeking after Jesus. Compare 2 Chronicles 12:14. He did evil because he had not set his heart on the Lord, with Matthew 6:33, which says, "Seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Jeremiah 29:13 says this, "You will seek me and find me when you seek me with all your heart." Mary did seek Jesus with all her heart, but there would be a detour before she found him. And this too seems to be a natural part of life. Next, what we see is Mary looked for the disciples. Verses 2 through 9 tell us, "So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple, the one whom Jesus loved, and said to them, 'They have taken the Lord out of the tomb, and we do not know where they have laid him.' So Peter went out with the other disciple, and they were going toward the tomb. Both of them were running together. But the other disciple outran Peter and reached the tomb first. And stooping to look in, he saw the linen cloths lying there, but he did not go in. Then Simon Peter came, following him, and went into the tomb. He saw the linen cloths lying there, and the face cloth which had been on Jesus' head, not lying with the linen cloths, but folded up in a place by itself. Then the other disciple, who had reached the tomb first, also went in, and he believed, for as yet they did not understand the scripture, that he must rise from the dead. Then the disciples went back to their homes." Again, this was a natural reaction too. Mary was naturally upset to find the stone had been rolled away. Something was wrong and she needed help. And so she turned to the disciples, and in particular she turned to John and Peter. This too was natural. John and Peter were two of the three closest disciples of Jesus. They, along with James, had been with Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. And they also were the ones whom Jesus drew close to himself in the Garden of Gethsemane on the night that he was betrayed. They loved him, and he loved them. And it was natural for Mary to turn to them in a time of trouble. Now, naturally, Peter and John reacted quickly to the news from Mary. They raced to the tomb, and Peter naturally barged right on inside. Yet, as concerned as they were, there was nothing to be done. The tomb was empty. The tomb was empty. Now, we know that the empty tomb is a good thing. An empty tomb means that Jesus was resurrected and that he has power over death and hell, and that he can give us that power too. See, we need that power, and he has it. Naturally, however, the disciples did not yet comprehend these facts. They were no doubt stunned and bewildered, and they returned to their safe house to wait what came next. Mary, however, was beside herself. She didn't know what to do, so she just stood there crying. Like a friend of mine might say, she had a come apart. She had given up looking for Jesus. But that's when he found her. Finally, we see that Jesus looked for Mary. Jesus looked for Mary. Let's look at verses 11 through 18 now and see the rest of this story. But Mary stood weeping outside the tomb, and as she wept, she stooped to look into the tomb. And she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had lain, one at the feet and one at the head. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." Having said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you seeking?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Aramaic, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not cling to me, for I have not yet ascended to my Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and to your Father, to my God and to your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord," and that he had said these things to her. Just when Mary had given up looking for Jesus, Jesus came to look for her. And this too is natural. Jesus himself said that he came to seek and save that which was lost. And at this time in her life, Mary was feeling as lost as she had ever felt before. From the beginning of the Bible, God has demonstrated his love for us by seeking after us. He came to walk with Adam and Eve in the garden in the cool of the day. He came for Moses in the burning bush so that he could deliver Israel. Not only that, but he came to Isaiah in the night to call him as a prophet. And of course, God came to earth in the form of a man to save all who trust in Jesus from their sins. So it comes naturally to Jesus to take the initiative. And like the shepherd in the parable, go and find the lost sheep. Remember, Mary, like all of us, was frail, limited, and fallen. She was a human being. She could do nothing to save herself. Indeed, in this instance, she couldn't even find Jesus. But it was when she was at her wit's end, when she had nothing else to try, and when she had no one else to turn to, that she found Jesus, because he was looking for her. As we conclude today, let me tell you a story about my mother-in-law. My mother-in-law has always had a pithy way of saying things that lodged that thought very firmly in my mind. One day she was talking about a young couple who had just been married. She said about their courtship that he chased her until she caught him. He chased her until she caught him. Yeah. In this case, the opposite was true. Mary was looking for Jesus, and then he found her. But the same can be true for all of us today. Jesus wants a relationship with every one of us. He will come to us, but we must first give up our feeble attempts to make our lives something useful. When we do that, he'll catch us and we'll find him. And in him, we will have all that we'll ever want or ever need. During this Easter period, during this time when we're facing the COVID-19 crisis, this message is more important than ever before. We need to look for Jesus, but we need to let him find us. And when we do, we will find a great blessing, and that we will find everything we want or need in him. Thank you for watching. Every blessing, Chaplain Otis Corbett.